All right, guys, what's going on? We're here. We're live. Welcome to a new Poker Live podcast. My name is Joe Ingram, a.k.a. Chicago Joey, joined today by I thought I was going to be joined by two men today, but we're joined by a man today who is the reason that most of us are able to play online poker for a living, the reason most of us are able to lose a lot of money playing poker potentially. He's a legend in the poker world. He is the founder of 2+2 Poker Forums and 2+2 Publications. Is that correct, too, Mason?
Yes, it's 2+2 Publishing.
Okay, 2+2 Publishing, 2+2 for Poker Forum. He's the man in charge. He's. I don't know, man. I think that's all I need to really say about you, man. What's up, Mason? Mason Malmuth. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, good. You can see if anybody can see me, I'm sitting in the office, my office, and take the camera. Pointing a camera, that's Matt Skolansky's office. You can see it's twice the size as mine. That's because he does the work and I don't.
Guys in the chat, what's going on? We are live streaming this on YouTube and on Twitch. If you have any comments, questions throughout, let me know. Post them on either one. And yeah, so Mason, if people out there might not know much about you just because they like, I mean, you sort of like, you post in some threads on 2+2 and you don't really post in threads where most of the guys on Twitch would ever go to. So tell the guys a little bit about yourself. I give you a little brief intro, but yeah, tell the guys that out there who don't know who you are.
Well, I guess I've been around a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a mathematician, or was. I actually worked more as a statistician than a mathematician. And when I came west in around 1980, I got interested in gambling. And because of my statistical background, which was a little bit unique because I had worked for the Census Bureau where they're working with finite sampling statistics as opposed to infinite sampling statistics, I felt there were some things about gambling that I knew that nobody else knew, even though I was fairly new at it. And so it just kind of went from there. 1983, I got an article published in Gambling Times magazine. And ever since then, I've been busy, in this writing publishing field.
So you kind of cut off at 1983 there. Okay, so so in 1983 you started getting into the publishing, and sort of what transpired from that point on?
Well, I was busy. In 1983, I was working for the Northrop Corporation, and I guess it's fair to say I was working on blowing up the Soviet Union. And I got interested in poker, and where I was working in Pico Rivera, California, and if I went 1 mile in one direction, I was at the Commerce Club, and if I went about 2 miles in the other direction, I was at the Bicycle Club. So I began to play a lot of poker in my free time.
Okay, so
it just all kind of grew from there.
So you were plotting to blow up the Russians in the 1980s?
Yeah, I was working on that.
And can you give us any stories, or is this classified information from that time period?
Well, I don't know what's classified today and what isn't. I mean, when I left the company, I had to sign things where I promised I wouldn't talk about it.
Okay.
But I was working on the stealth bomber.
Did you ever get completed with the stealth bomb?
Well, it works today.
Oh, okay. It's quite interesting. So you decided to put this to the side and leave to pursue poker?
Well, I got interested in poker and gambling, and I was interested in writing about it. And so I decided I would leave my job and come to Las Vegas and play poker and also write about poker and gambling and maybe play a little blackjack as well.
Mm.
And in 1987, I self-published a book, and that began the publishing company. And I knew I'd gotten to know David Skolansky real well. So in 1988, together we did the initial edition of Hold'em Poker for Advanced Players. that was immediately successful. Kind of kept on. And in 1996, we had gotten both Borders and Barnes & Noble to pick us up. So we thought that would be real good. And then I got my initial order from Barnes & Noble, and I actually still have the letter, where they wanted 10 copies of one of our books. And at that time, they had 500 stores. And we quickly realized that if we called them up and said, you know, we have the best books in the field, the answer we would get, if we could get through to a book buyer, would be, well, that's what every publisher says. So we came up with this idea that we would start a website on the internet, which was still fairly new then. And then we hoped that if we could get a little bit of a following, we could then call the bookstores up and say, look, we have a little bit of a following here. There is a market for our books. So that's the way the website began, and that happened in 1997, which was 10 years after my initial book publication. And it just all grew and grew from there. And of course, we were helped by a great poker boom. And now it's all collapsing.
That went bad fast. Okay, wait a sec. So now what's collapsing? The poker ecosystem, which I guess kind of is, or is it 2+2?
No, the whole poker ecosystem is collapsing, and that's affected us. You know, with Black Friday and the fact that the U.S. players have been, you know, mostly kicked off the internet. And I also think that the dominant game being no limit hold'em is not good for long-term poker growth. Even though we did quite well, you know, selling no limit hold'em books, so we're a little bit guilty there ourselves. But between those two things, you know, everything is contracting right now.
Derek Castillo in Twitch chat says, ask him if he was an engineer or if he was a statistician for Northrop.
I was more of a, I actually still have my business card and it says mathematician, but I really worked more as a statistician. I was an expert in probability theory, and they needed somebody at that time who understood probability theory. So that's how I got the job there.
How do you get a job for the government back in the 70s? Would you start working there in the 70s?
Yeah, I first went to work for the United States Census Bureau in 1975. Mm-hmm. And I got that job because they came to my school and interviewed people. So that's how I got that job. And then for the 1980 census, I got sent out west. And the Census Bureau is it's bigger today. In fact, an old friend of mine is the director of Census Bureau today. But I was sent out west for the 1980 census. And I ended up working in Laguna Niguel, California, where the weather is perfect. And so when the census work ended, I was offered my old position back at headquarters, but I decided I'd just stay in California. So over the next few months, I began looking for a job. I just, would send out resumes. And Northrop Corporation, this was part of the Reagan military buildup, picked me up. So I went to work for them. I had to move up towards Los Angeles. And then work for them for the next 5 years. So,
I guess looking back, are you happy with your decision in retrospect to stop doing that and start pursuing poker as I guess it's kind of turned into the life. You've been doing it now for the past 30 years, 32 years now.
Well, we've been very, very successful, so I have to be very happy with that. But I did leave particularly with Northrop, I did leave what was probably going to be a very good career with a lot of potential. So that's kind of a little bit of a mixed bag there.
So it kind of sounds like it probably would have went well either direction you chose. So you just chose this one.
Well, there was more risk going the way I went because, I didn't have to be real successful, playing poker, and the stuff I wrote, didn't have to be picked up by magazines and didn't have to sell and so on. And then it probably would have been hard to get back into the aerospace industry, because they would have said, well, what have you been doing the past few years? And I said, well, I've been gambling. that would have taken care of me.
I guess if you're known as like an expert in probability and like an expert statistician, I think I used that word correctly. I'm sure if you explain to them, like, yeah, I was testing out my knowledge of numbers and probability in the poker world, and now I figured out it really worked really well. Now I'm back here because I missed the job. Probably could have said something like that.
Probably. Plus, if I would have tried to have gone back to where I left, they already knew me, so they would have.
Right. Yeah.
Would have known they wanted me or not. The problem is a lot of times, even if they want you back, they already have somebody else who's filled that position. So there might not be a position open. But none of that ever came up. I was able to come out here and do well enough, right from the beginning, that I never had to look back or anything.
How do you get the idea to self-publish a book? So this was in 1986, you said was the first book? Well,
what had happened was I had a contract with a company called Gambling Times to do my first book. And by 1987, they had gone bankrupt. And they hadn't published my book, so I had to get an attorney and wrestle my book back from them. And when I did that, I just self-published it. And at that time, there was about a dozen or so stores that specialized in gambling books. The best known one would have been Gambler's Book Club here in Las Vegas. And so that meant that I already had a small market where I could sell my stuff. So in the beginning, I just had books Xeroxed and sent them to these gambling stores, and they sold. And so that allowed us to, or allowed me to, to continue on and do more stuff. So in 1987, when I got my first book back, I actually self-published 3 books that year. And they all sold enough that I was able to continue on in that area.
I mean, it's kind of funny because now in this day and age, self-publishing is pretty common, but in the 80s or 90s,
like, it's very uncommon what I did. And today with Amazon, it's very easy to self-publish because they have all the equipment, so to speak, available, for people who want to go that route. And that wasn't available when I started out.
So when you self-publish a book back then, I'm really curious how this works because I've read about it a bit now, but back then, I mean, are you typing it out, and then are you like, how do you even send it? Do you make a couple copies and then send it to different companies to check out, or like, what's the process even like back then?
Well, in the very beginning, I had a computer and a printer. So I'd print out the book, the manuscript. I mean, I actually took books over to Kinko's where they would resize the pages to a book size, and then they would stick a little cover on it, put a spiral thing in it, and so that's how my original books were produced. It's very, very amateurish compared to what we do today, but it did allow us, once David Sklansky joined me, to sell enough books that we could continue on.
Was the 1997 book, The Theory of Poker by David Sklansky, do you know if that was the first major, I guess, popular poker book to bring up the term GTO or just expand on GTO? Do you know if that's accurate?
First of all, Sklansky on Poker Theory, which is the original book, came out in 1978.
And then they updated. And then, so what's the 1997 one that I've been reading?
The 1978 book had a game theory chapter in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have my dates right. In 1981, he worked with another writer, and they expanded the book, and it got picked up by a major publisher called Prentice Hall. So originally, back in the 70s, a Gambler's Book Club had a publishing arm, and so they published Sklansky on Poker Theory, but their owner had gotten ill at that time, so they went out of the publishing business. So David had these books returned to him. I think he had 3 or 4 books at that time, and so they redid Sklansky on Poker Theory, and they retitled it and called it Winning Poker. And in 1981, it went to Prentice Hall. And then I did a printing, sold a printing out and dropped it. They didn't think it had enough potential. So by 1988, I think, David got the rights to his book back. So he was Xeroxing it as well. And in 1989, some books by then, he had some books by then, and we'd also co-written 2 books at that time. So we came to agreement one day to unite all our books together. So I always say 2+2 started in 1987 because that's when I self-published the book. But in 1989 is when it really became more of an umbrella for a number of books. Mm. So all of a sudden, in 1989, we had about 10 titles, one of which was Winning Poker. And so now we got it better printed, and we sold it as Winning Poker. And then in 1994, David and I went through the book very carefully and updated it, and we made a lot of editing changes. So the version you're reading, and we also changed the title to The Theory of Poker. So the version you have today is actually the 1994 version.
Okay.
If your book says 97 on it, that's just a printing date. But you actually have the 1994 version, and that's the version that's available today.
Wow. So he first wrote about the term game theory
He first wrote about game theory in 1978.
Holy fuck.
A lot of this stuff, people don't realize it was actually done by either David or I many, many years ago. You know, they think things like game theory are new. In 1987, I published the first edition of my book, Gambling for the Topic. In there, I have a little example of how you can figure out values for tournaments, which is based on chip sizes, which is just the independent chip model. I don't call it that, but that's the first place the independent chip model appears. And we had a big thing on our website recently that involved Jonathan Little, because he wrote something that was incredibly wrong about how much bankroll you need. And all that stuff dates back to this 1987 book. Actually dates back to a year before that, because the article about how to compute your bankroll first appeared in Gambling Times magazine. So all this stuff that people are still arguing about today and trying to figure out, a lot of it was done many, many years ago. Just not aware of it.
It's interesting. I'm actually doing like a little video / feels like a research project about GTO and where did GTO come from in terms of in poker. And I thought it was 1994, 97, but I didn't know it dated back to 1978. That's pretty crazy that he was already like thinking about ways to incorporate.
Well, game theory is something that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, it was, I think, 19.
Actually dates back to the 1920s when John von Neumann, who was the father of game theory, first wrote a paper about it. In the 1950s, he produced a book with an economist named Oscar Morgenstern called Theory of Games and Economic Behavior. And in that book is a poker chapter where he's applying, I think it's draw poker, but he's applying game theory techniques. So you have, I think that's where it would go back to is this book from the 1950s in that poker chapter.
I gotta check that out. I was doing some research on like who initially wrote about it first, and I guess everyone talks about the Nash equilibrium in poker, and that was like something that people, I don't know if they still use it now, but that was like the first. I mean, it feels like for me, obviously, I'm still, I only started playing poker in 2007 now, which is when I'm talking to you about playing poker, you've been playing 20 years longer than I have, so it's like you have you got the you're much more familiar with a lot of this stuff than.
Actually, it's 27 years longer. 20. I started around 1980.
It's crazy. I mean, so back then, what is it like to be a professional poker player in the 80s? Like, what's your day-to-day life like? Are you going to the casinos in LA? Are you like what? I can't even imagine.
I give you a little example. There was I guess a year ago, somebody put a link to an article that was in a Sports Illustrated archive. And the article was about playing poker in Gardena in the 1960s. And so it's interesting reading that article, because I started playing there around 1980, but I saw some of the same things. And like, there's a rule in poker that says you can't remove chips from the table. You know what that rule is there?
Lagging? Can you repeat that one more time? It lagged out a little bit.
Okay, there's a rule in poker that says if you have chips on the table, you can't take them off the table and put them in your pocket.
Right.
Why is that?
Probably. I mean, I would hate it if some people did that, but I don't know what's the exact reason why. I'm not sure.
Well, when you ask that question to people who play poker, they'll say, well, you can't take your chips off the table because it's not fair to other people who want to win chips that maybe they lost to you.
Right, exactly.
But in this article, it's explained that if the card room manager of one of the Gardena card rooms thought you were cheating, he could come to the table, because all the games were dealt by the players at this time. There were no house dealers. So the manager could come to the table and stop the game, and he could take your chips and distribute them to the other players. But they were not allowed to search your person. So because of that, nobody was allowed to take chips off the table and put them in their pocket. And I believe that's where the rules started.
Really?
So that gives you just a little idea what it was like to play poker in these places many years ago.
So were you like, you know how we see the live poker players today, they're playing 8-10 hours a day. So you're playing 8-10 hours a day every day, 7 days a week sort of thing? Or like what kind of grinder were you?
Well, I was working then, so I would work, and then after work I would go to the card rooms and play for 2 or 3, 4 hours. That's actually still similar to what I do today. I never really play much more than that. And also at that time, well, I guess it depended where you were in California. I think at that time the Gardena card rooms were now open 24 hours a day, but other places would close at 2 o'clock. And if you go back a few years earlier than 1980, the Gardena rooms that also closed at 2 o'clock. And that meant, between 1 and 2, the play would just get crazy sometimes as people were trying to get even for the night.
What did Jonas? Jonas has a couple good questions down here. Jonas says, well, this is a little bit off topic of what we're talking about now. I kind of like this. I like this subject. Actually, I'm going to stay on. Jonah, I'm going to get to your question because this is a really great question. And I'm definitely very curious to hear Mason's answer to this. But so you quit your job. So what kind of poker player were you like when you quit your job officially? So you're a full-time player. Like, how did you approach playing poker back then? From like
Same way. I mean, at that time in California, only forms of draw poker were legal. So I studied what available material there was and learned how to play draw poker and also California lowball. But to come to Las Vegas, those games weren't spread here. So I had a choice to either learn how to play limit hold'em or 7-card stud. Limit hold'em, I was a little more attracted to, and I knew David Sklansky by then pretty well. So I began to talk to him about how to play limit hold'em. And based on my conversation, I created notes. And after a while, I had a pretty extensive number of pages of notes, and that's how the book Hold'em Poker for Advanced Players was written. The notes I created with David Sklansky. He would tell me something, and I'd go play and ask him some questions, and we'd go over things and debate some things, and that would end up being a note. And that's fairly similar to the way I do a lot of things still today.
Are you still a big note taker in terms of written notes, or are you notes on the computer these days?
Well, ironically, if I go back to my college days, I never took notes. But for this work, I needed to create a document. So I wrote that down and saved it on the computer. And today on my computer, there's just a lot of computer files because there's articles and books and all sorts of things on there. But that's basically how it began.
They say, do you know what an end boss is, Mason?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do you know what an end boss is?
Not really.
Okay, an end boss is a term we use for people. It's like, okay, so let's say you're playing a video game. It's the final boss. It's like the guy at the top. So for like online poker, we say like Ike Hollywood Haxton's like an end boss, or WCG Ryder. They're at the top of the pecking order right now. And some people in the chat were saying you were one of the first GTO end bosses in poker.
Well, that's probably not right. I was always aware of game theory, and I did read some game theory books and so on, but there was never really much need to apply game theory in the games I was playing. If you go back to the 80s and 90s, there were certain concepts, particularly on the end, which came into play, which you'd want to do against, which you could fall back to against the better players, but it wasn't like what's being done today. Mm. I mean, we published a book a couple of years ago by Matthew Wanda, which steps you through, each round and all your ranges and so on, but based on game theory, and nothing like that was done back when I started out.
Someone asked a really good question about this. I'm trying to find it. No, I can't find it. I'm going to ask Jonas a question. Jonas said, what does he think about the importance of books in today's poker world and how the market has shifted to training sites, videos, and online books, which some of your books are the online books I guess people read too. But yeah, right. What do you think about the importance of books in today's poker world?
Well, many of our books are now in ebook form.
Right.
So you can get them online. I think of the video training and all that stuff as a mixed bag. It really depends on how good it is. And I think a lot of it needs to be better. When you read one of our books, you get about 30 hours of information. I mean, it's packed in there pretty good. But when I've watched a lot of these videos and stuff, the information on them is not very dense. So you might spend an hour watching a video and get 3 minutes of information. So I think that's the advantage a good book has over a lot of the video training stuff. On the other hand, if the video training is done well, there's no reason it can't be dense with information. And I think as time went on, the video training sites began to do more and more in that way. So, but it's still, if it's done well, it's going to be the same information, whether it's a book or a video you're watching, or a coach talking to you. Hmm. Anyway, since you brought this up, I'm going to change the subject slightly. I'm working on a new book right now. It'll be the first time in, I guess, 11 years. I think the last time I was listed as an author or co-author on a book was 11 years ago. So today I'm writing a brand new book, which is called Real Poker Psychology. We have discussion on it right now on our books and publications forum. And I think what's really unique about this book is I'm a mathematician. I know very little about psychology. So I felt that made me uniquely qualified to write a book on poker psychology, because I won't do all the stupid things I think a lot of these poker psychologists do.
Who are poker psychologists anyway? Are these like, I feel like I see some people mentioned on Twitter. There might be a coaching thing in the coaching forum, but who exactly are poker psychologists? What is it like? What does a poker psychologist mean? Do they?
Well, our company has two books that would come under the heading of Psychology of Poker. One is by Alan Schoonmaker, which is called The Psychology of Poker, and it's a very sort of a fundamental book. The other book we have that is called Inside the Poker Mind by a man named John Feeney, who had a PhD in psychology. And he was a very, very good high-stakes limit hold'em player. And this is a really terrific book for people who haven't read it. Again, I think it was published in the year 2000. And it seems like the poker psychology field kind of lay dormant for a while, but now it's gotten active. I guess people started feeling they weren't doing that well, and maybe they needed something else. So this idea of mental coaches popped up. And I reviewed a book by Jared Tendler recently, which I gave a good review to. And then over the years, in articles I've written, some which were in my poker essays book, and some which were just sitting on my computer now. They weren't really out there anywhere. I had about enough material for maybe half a psychology book. And so I'd been kicking around this idea for several years of writing a book on poker psychology. And recently, I guess one of these poker psychologists came along, a woman by the name of Patricia Cardner, who claims to have a PhD. And I started looking at it, and in spots, I just burst out laughing. So thanks to her, I now have plenty of material to write about.
That might be one of the best shots that we've had on the podcast of all time right there, Mason. That might have been the best one.
Well, I'm going to make sure she listens to this podcast then.
Well, I think I've seen, that's one of the people I said I've seen on Twitter. I don't know much about her, but I think another one is Elliot Rowe. I believe I see him mentioned as a poker psychologist too. Yeah,
well, he's I don't know much about him. I know he buys a little ad on our site. He's a hypnotist guy. I don't know if his stuff is good or not.
Okay.
I have no idea. I don't like to automatically assume people are no good unless I've reviewed their stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you were reading your book and you started laughing, and then that was your motivation for wanting to do this.
Actually, I'll tell you exactly what my final motivation was. Okay. I wasn't reading your book, but I was on one of these Jonathan Little websites, and I think it's the training side I was on. So they have all these different coaches, and there's all these videos from these different coaches. But I guess for each coach, there's a couple of free videos. So somehow I landed on her page, and I listened to this free video. And she was talking about tilt. Now, it just turned out that 2 years ago, I presented a paper at the 15th annual conference on gambling and risk-taking, which was sponsored by the University of Nevada, Reno and the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, called A Mathematical Model for Tilt, Cause, and Cure. So anyway, I'm listening to this video of hers, and she's talking about it. If you think you're going on tilt, I'm getting feedback. Anyway, just talk about if you think you're going on tilt, you should think of things that you should be thankful for. And I guess that's supposed to help soothe your mindset. And then she said something like, you should be thankful for the hot shower you took. And when I heard that, I just couldn't take it anymore. So that was my incentive to write the book, at least to finish it.
I don't know. I gotta check this video out now. I don't know much about her, and I don't know much about the videos, I guess, that they put out. So I gotta check them out.
I got her book. It's called Positive Poker, and I read the whole thing. I have a Kindle. Kindles are real nice for putting notes, making notes in. And I got about 200 places I marked, and there's all this stuff like like for example, they talk about self-confidence, how it's important to have self-confidence when you're playing poker. Well, I think it's important to know how to play poker well. You're not a very good poker player, and somehow you boost up your self-confidence. Perhaps maybe because of the short-term luck factor, you run good for the last couple of months, but you still don't play very well. Well, what happens is you end up going to the bigger games where players are a lot tougher, and you lose all your money. I mean, it's just, I just now have lots and lots of stuff like that to work with. So I think it's going to be a pretty good book, and it's going to challenge a lot of what's out there.
Calzo says, what do you say about his dissertation? What's the timeline for this? When can we expect to see the book? Calzo says, I might even give a reference if it's finished when I do my dissertation in 2 years.
We hope to have it out and published by the end of the year.
Cool. That's awesome. We will be
the first draft is 90% finished. So we should be able to get it done by then. If it's not by the end of the year, it'll be the end of January.
Okay. Cool. Well, we'll whenever it comes out, I'll make sure I update everyone listening and do a little video about it. And I mean, so for people that read this book, do you think this is a strategy book, or is it like some stories, or is it sort of like The Mental Game of Poker by Jared Ten? Is it like around a similar outline of that?
It's probably more similar to Inside the Poker Mind by John Feeney. That's sort of a model for me. But it does have some stories in there illustrating some points. But it turns out in the world of poker psychology that there's a couple of ideas that I think answer almost all the questions. One of them is that you have a very short-term, very high short-term luck factor. The other is that poker is based on probability theory. Probability theory at times can be very counterintuitive.
Mm.
And he asked about stories. I actually wrote this up last night. One of the things that sometimes happens because of the high short-term luck factors, people run good, and they'll think they're experts and they're not. You know, I'm making it hard to talk here. But anyway, I guess about 20 years ago, there was a guy in town. He's been down for about 6 months. And he told everybody his name was 80% Dave because these were the in-limit hold'em games at the time, and he claimed that he won 80% of the time he played. So here was a guy who didn't play very well, who obviously had run pretty good. And it's kind of well known among people who play poker that the experts can play a few more hands. So since he was now an expert, he was going to play, a lot more hands. So I was in a game with him one day, and I had 2 aces under the gun, and I raised, and he's sitting on my immediate left. And he said to me, well, you're so tight. The only hand you would raise in that position is aces. Is that what you have? And I said to him, yes, I have 2 aces. And he said, well, I'm going to call anyway. And he had a king-queen offsuit. And he flopped a king and ended up losing a big pot. And when the hand was over, I told him that from now on, he's going to be known as 79% Dave. So that's a few stories like that in the book.
Well, I'm trying to figure out my audio here. I got a new microphone here, so I was hearing, that might have been why you were hearing a little feedback. And some people on YouTube said that the audio was tripping, but the audio should be good now.
Yeah, this is much better now. So anyway, I mean, there are a few stories like that in the book. One of the chapters is called "It's Not What You Eat." I explain how it's okay to eat six Big Macs before you play poker. It won't make much difference. And when reading these poker psychology book stuff, in fact, we had another book that was the publisher was buying advertising on our website, and we actually stopped it. And it was basically sort of a diet book for poker players. And this author had cited all these studies. Well, these were studies. Track athletes could run faster, and basketball players could shoot a higher percentage of baskets. And we said, well, what does that have to do with poker? And not many people know this, but I've played tennis since I was a kid. And I still play a lot today. And I use tennis as an example in the book. When you're playing tennis, if a ball is hit towards you, 2 things happen. First, if you're a good player, you immediately know what you want to do. In other words, you know what spot in the court you want to hit the ball to. You know how hard you want to hit it. You know how much spin you want to put on the ball, and so on. And then the next thing that happens is you have to do it. And to do it, that requires timing and coordination and speed and so on. And that's where the diet comes in. The diet helps you very much with timing and coordination. I know that my tennis game improves. It doesn't change where I want to hit the ball, though. Now, when you go to poker, the first thing also happens. You and I are in a poker game, and I bet now it's your turn to act. You have to decide whether you're going to fold, call, or raise, and if it's no limit or pot limit, you might think about how much you're going to raise. And that's something you'll know, if you're a very good player, you'll know very quickly. And then you have to do it. Well, you don't need timing and coordination to do it. You just put the chips in the pot. So all this stuff about diet that you see for poker players, I mean, to me, is just garbage. And we even put a chapter in there about Danny Robinson. I don't know if you know who he was. Danny Robinson.
He used to be a 7-card stud legend from.
He passed away last year. I knew him moderately well. A friend of mine knew him very well. And he was like the best 7-card stud player there ever was. And everybody liked him. He was a great guy. He was also degenerate. He was addicted to drugs on and off. And he got so heavy he had to have gastric bypass surgery. He was a gigantic loser on sports betting, and it just goes on from there. Yeah, he was like the best 7-card stud player there may have ever been. So here's a guy who did everything wrong. He ate wrong. He was sleep deprived. He didn't get any exercise. And it didn't affect his poker. And he passed away last year, but it was really more from a car accident than from being ill. But I've seen a lot of poker players, die early because they did not live a healthy lifestyle. It didn't mean that they didn't play poker well. And just a couple examples of that, you have Stu Unger, who was a drug addict. And there was a man named Roger Moore. I doubt if many of your listeners would know who he was. But he was an ultra high stakes player for many, many years. And he smoked like 5 packs of cigarettes a day. And I think that did him in. And then there was a man named Bill Smith, who I actually played some with back in the 1980s. He won the World Series of Poker. He died from alcoholism. And, there's other people like that.
But so do you think these days, though, so before it seemed like people they stayed in Vegas, they played in Vegas, but now there's so much more traveling that goes into it. There's other people who, it's sort of like maybe you should take advantage of any way you can get an edge, and maybe diet, before it could have been a way where, you didn't have to worry about it. But now with all the traveling, if you're playing online, you're playing a lot of games at once, then maybe it does become more of a factor.
It does. It has to be very small. Obviously, if you want to live a long, healthy life, I think diet is important. In fact, I actually put this in the book, the healthiest diet there is what's known as a calorie restriction diet, where it's now known that if you eat about 1,200 calories a day and you do it right, that will probably extend your life and you'll live a very healthy life. You'll become very thin, and most people just can't do this type of diet. But whether that helps your poker game, I highly doubt it. And that's because you know how to play poker. I mean, it doesn't help your aces hold up anymore. See, if you're a runner and you're on a good diet, you might be able to run a 100-yard dash a little bit faster because of the way you're eating. But if you're a good poker player, you already know how to play the hands.
I'm just trying to tie it to my own personal poker experience. So I mean, I used to have a very terrible diet, and I think I managed okay. So I guess I don't know. I feel like just for live though, like all these guys they're going to all these different tournaments. They're flying to Florida. They're flying to Barcelona. Like if you have a shit diet and you're eating and you're drinking, I mean, if you have these habits, it puts such a more of a toll on your body doing these things, living in hotels and like sleeping in hotels every single night. So I would just, I mean, I feel like it has to matter a little bit.
It's not good for you, but does it change the way you play your poker hands? I mean, does it make your race a whole lot more if you go to a bad diet? If I bet and you know your hand, and you have a hand that you're is supposed to raise, it doesn't really matter what you ate. If you have a hand that you should bluff with 20% of the time, that's something you know. So 20% of the time you're going to bluff. The fact that you just you hadn't slept for a day. There's actually quoted this too. There's a famous spot at the beginning of Theory of Poker where David Skolansky says that the game's good. You should get toothpicks to prop your eyes open. That's because you play. I know David doesn't like that got written in there, but I mean, it's basically right. Anyway, so I have a whole book of this stuff.
Go ahead, repeat that one more time.
I said I have a whole book of this stuff, that's coming out, and I think a lot of people will find it very, very interesting. They'll see how the short-term luck factor causes all sorts of issues, which are easily explained, and a lot of these poker psychologists try to come up with all sorts of stuff to cure it. It's not the cure. I mean, it's tough. Just another example, they talk about mental toughness. If you're playing football and you're getting hit and you have to play with injuries, you got to be mentally tough. But I mean, I'm not exactly sure what that has to do with a poker game. If you're mentally tough, but I know how to play poker a lot better than you, I'm going to win all your money.
If you're just joining us, guys, on Twitch, we're joined by Mason Malmuth. He is the co-founder of 2+2 Publications, the poker forum. Without him, I would not be here doing a podcast because I would have never started playing poker if I wouldn't have found 2+2. So, it's like, what kind of impact do you feel like 2+2 has had in the history of poker, in the poker world? I mean,
well, I don't say it very often because I get accused of being too self-centered, but I think we revolutionized how poker is played, and we also revolutionized many other aspects of gambling. I got very fortunate in that early in my career, I got to know people who were very, very smart and understood a lot of things. That includes David Skolansky and, Dan Harrington and other people. So all those ideas got churned up and kind of put in a big pot, and we slowly, over time, just produced everything.
I think there was one comment I had on Facebook, which I already know the answer to, but I'll ask it officially. It's from Daniel Musa. He says, looking forward to this one. Can you delve a little into how successful a biz 2+2 is, and if their revenue has ridden the same waves as the boom and subsequent Black Friday drop, and if the dwindling numbers in poker these days have had an effect on their business? Which the obvious answer is yes, but can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, to be specific, 2002 sold 45,000 books, which from a personal standpoint was very, very good. 2005, we sold 10 times as many books. And here we were, a business, we did absolutely nothing to that, and it just kind of exploded, on our, by itself because of the poker boom. Now today the numbers have come back down to the 2002 levels and below, just because we have a lot more titles today. And the same thing happened on the website. Our best year in terms of traffic and revenue on the website was 2008, and today it's come back down a great deal.
I think I'm really I really want to. There's a lot of discussion in both chats right now about the whole entire diet aspect, and there's some people that seem to agree with you, and there's other people that seem very much disagree with you. I'm actually really curious on what people like. I'm just curious what people in general think about that, because
Well, one of the things that happens, this is one of the arguments I've seen, is you go to a tournament today, and some of the top players are in very good physical shape. So does that mean that this diet and exercise and good sleep, did that help them play poker? Well, I would argue that the type of person who's going to eat a good diet, is going to regularly exercise, make sure he gets the proper sleep, is going to be a very well-organized, disciplined person who's probably also going to study and try to learn how to play poker well. So there's a correlation there, but one doesn't really have anything to do with the other. You could be way overweight and sleep deprived and so on, but you can still know how to play poker well. And that's really the key being a successful poker player. So one of the ways I look at it is it's more sophisticated than this term, but we all have a basic strategy for playing poker. Maybe your basic strategy, if you were to type it out, would come to 20 pages. Someone else's basic strategy, if they were to type it out, might come to 50 pages. Well, obviously, the guy who has 50 pages is going to know a whole lot more about how to play poker well than the guy with 20 pages. And what's interesting about this, so the guy with 20 pages makes a bad play, but he doesn't know that because his 20 pages doesn't tell him that it's a bad play. The guy with the 50 pages, he actually knows that this play was bad because he understands the whole game of poker much better. And he can see where his opponents are making certain errors, while from the opponent's point of view, they're not making any mistakes. And that's kind of the way the psychology of poker works. You know, another thing I talk about in the book, which is coming up today, is that there's this huge emphasis on hand histories, that you got to look at hundreds of thousands of hand histories. I mean, the right way to learn, in my opinion, the right way to learn how to play poker is there's a finite number of concepts that kind of govern good poker play. And they also govern other things that are associated with poker, such as the short-term luck factor and everything. Once you get a good handle on those concepts and you start to get the experience of playing and you learn how to balance concepts against each other, I mean, you don't need to look at hundreds of thousands of hand histories. And in fact, if you look at these huge number of hand histories, I think you eventually go crazy. You're trying to learn how to play poker like that. So how do you get these finite number of concepts? Well, there's good poker books. You know, hopefully, if you want to go to video training sites, you find a good one. In my case, early on, I got to talk to a number of people who understood poker quite well. And that's the way I learned to play poker reasonably well, and at least for the games that I play. And of course, today with this emphasis on, I mean, there is value in looking at some hand histories, and there is value in talking about hands and so on. But I just think it's gotten way out of hand. So that's another example of what's in the book and how these people just seem to get so much of this stuff wrong.
I'm excited for the book. Nathan asks, and I already have a good idea of the answers to this question a little bit. What are his thoughts on competitors? I don't know if these are competitors, such as Poker Strategy, Poker VIP, etc. Would those be considered competitors of 2+2? Does 2+2 have competitors in terms of, I guess, I don't think those are 2+2 competitors, really.
I guess they all are a little bit. We've never really thought much in the terms of competitors. Our idea was just to put out the best product we could. I know in the publishing field, we never felt we had a competitor, any value. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the world of publishing, for years, our biggest competitor would have been Cardozo Publishing, and we never took them seriously as any sort of competitor to us. Mm-hmm. But it just didn't matter. I mean, our goal, and David Sklansky and I talked about this many times, was to not only write the best books on poker, but to write the books that ever would be written on poker. That's sort of what we tried to achieve. I think we've done a pretty good job in that area because a lot of our books, have stood the test of time. theory of poker is perhaps the best example. And so we've never really thought very much in terms of competitors. In fact, if you look at our website, we always welcomed all these other companies on there. You know, Poker Strategy used to advertise with us, and we allow discussion of all this stuff. And part of the idea of our website is we wanted to make this sort of a home or hub for everything poker. So if another publishing company is putting out books, they're not allowed to self-promote, but they can certainly come on our website and answer questions about the books they put out. So that's always been the way we've done business.
So I guess do you guys still do business that way? It seems like
Pretty much.
Obviously you guys are against some people and some of their products, but for the most part, it seems like you're pretty open to all different.
Well, we've always had the philosophy that we wanted to steer people who relied on 2+2 to those products that were good, whether they were ours or someone else's. But we also wanted to steer them away from things that we thought were questionable. So, you know, there used to be a writer in the field named John Patrick. I don't know how many people remember him, but I mean, if his stuff would have ever gotten talked about on our website, we just would have said, you know, this is not something that is even worth your time looking at.
Yeah, I remember you told me in Vegas. I think we were out to like a lunch, and you told me some interesting story about. You told me some guy who was writing some stuff, and I'm sure there's a lot of writers. They're writing some really, really bad information, and you sort of corrected him, and they got upset at you because you were like bashing. You were bashing, but you're like, listen, like what you're saying is very wrong, and you sort of had like this little feud with somebody. I can't remember the exact person that was with, but I thought that was really fascinating.
There have been a number of people like that. I remember. I did just one example. I mean, there's a lot of examples like this, but I remember Tom McAvoy once wrote a column where he put this formula for how to settle up in tournaments. So I replied in another column, and I gave an example using that formula where the guy the guy who was in the lead when they did the settle up, based on these chip positions I gave, would get more money to get for winning the tournament. So I remember he got very, very mad at that. And then it actually happened a month or so later, and somebody posted on our website. It was a little tournament down at the Four Queens. When they went to use this formula to settle up, turned out that the guy who was supposed to win the guy in the lead would have gotten more than the tournament winner would get. So they ended up not using it. So, I mean, I've just been through lots and lots of stuff like that. I once was challenged by Stanford Wong, who's well known in the blackjack field, and he put a review up of one of my book, and I use a term called self-weighting. I use it actually in a number of books, and he challenged anybody to find a math or statistics book that had this term in there. Well, what he didn't know is that this term came out of finite sampling statistics, and there were books from that, which I happen to have, which we use at the Census Bureau, but this wasn't used by most statisticians. Call them up and, you know, give them the titles of 2 graduate level statistics books that actually had the term in there. And I told them no one to take the insults down. So I've been through that stuff a lot.
Do you try to stay away from those type of confrontations or those type of things now that you're now that you've been in the scene for so long, or do you still, I guess, I mean, you did say something earlier about that one woman, so I don't, yeah.
Not really. I mean, the stuff just comes along. It works on what we do. I mean, we don't go out there and look for it, but seems like things will be reasonably good in the world of poker and public and so on, and something new will work in.
Do you guys have any I guess, goals still for 2+2? I mean, is it now sort of the plan to just maintain its place in the poker world? So I guess what's like the idea behind? Do you think there's growth? If so, where do you think it could go, or how could it change?
Our plan right now is to basically maintain. You know, we're going to put out good books come along. You know, we'll put them out. We're not really out there seeking anything. We're hoping that more states, you know, will legalize internet poker, and if that happens, it could really start to grow again. And then we'll look at it then. But right at the moment, we're just sort of hoping the status quo we currently have maintains.
I feel like it's pretty well known, but the weird thing is, whenever I'm out in real world, in the real poker world, like no one ever goes on. They don't even really know what 2+2 is or go on 2+2. I find this incredibly weird because it's like I'm out on 2+2 every day, and I can't believe that so many people like haven't heard about it or don't use it in the poker world. I feel like there's almost growth. Like 2+2 has room to growth.
Well, that's an interesting point you raise. We feel that there's a lot of people who, for example, they've never read a 2+2 book, or they've never read a poker book, but they don't know it, but they're highly influenced by our books because they have to react to the way other people play. So I guess that's the case. We'd like to have more people come to the website, and you know, not everybody's on the internet. Not everybody knows about 2+2. You know, I think more people know about us than any other group.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess it's sort of, if you're a new 2+2 user, it's like kind of intimidating because there's there is, I mean, it's a good thing there's a lot of sub-forums, but it's also sort of it could be a negative thing for some people because there's, what the hell's happening here? There's almost too many places to go. So it's like if you're a new guy and you come on 2+2, you go on News Views Gossip, there's all these like terrible threads happening, like, you know, scammer, fucking, there's so many, we talked about this, there's so many negative threads in NVG that for a new person that comes on there, they might see this and be like, I'm getting out of here, man. This is like kind of depressing, or they might find it maybe fun. I don't know. Are you guys, what do you think about that, the state of things right now with I guess the main site NVG?
Actually, you've raised a point which we're concerned about. We think there are too many negative threads, and we're always afraid that a thread will start about somebody and it won't be true. That doesn't seem to have happened yet. And I think the reason there's so many negative threads is there's a lot of negative things in poker right now.
Yeah.
You know, more states come in and it begins to grow again, we'll start to see positive things again. But I think the negativity is just reflecting what's out there. The games are getting tougher. You know, it's hard to move your money around and all this other stuff.
Okay. Rob Straight said, I liked when Mason called Negreanu being out of line with his winning players comments. Yeah, I know you. I can't remember the specifics about you and Negreanu, but I know you and Daniel got a little bit of beef together, a little bit of history together.
Well, I hardly even know the guy. I maybe have had 30 seconds of conversation with him, but I know over 15 years ago, I got out of the blue. I got attacked by him on the old rec gambling site, and I had email from him from 15 years ago telling me I was insane and I needed to take my medication. And he's just every so often he just pops up again and attacks people. He's attacked us. He's attacked many other people. And I really think, you know, he's behaving now. And what we're going to do is anytime he does this stuff, we're going to call him out on it. You know, it's just I think it's very unfortunate that he's become the big star of poker.
Why? So why is that?
Because of his history of attacking people. I know that he's said so much stuff about me that's not true, and I even have emails from him, from a year ago or so, where he's telling me I need to take my medication and stuff like that. I mean, I don't even know the guy.
That was as recent as 1 year ago? 1 year ago?
Yeah, about a year ago, I think.
Wow. Oh. That's interesting. I wasn't unaware of that.
Well, I mean, it's private stuff. I mean, he's an important person in poker. We recognize that. And a lot of people are interested in what he says and does. So, we recognize that. We would just like to see him, but behave in a way we think someone in that position should behave. And, he seems to be doing that recently, so hopefully he stays that way.
So what do you mean? So you think that he shouldn't be attacking people publicly in a position like he's in?
Right, especially with the type of attacks he did. I mean, I'll just give you an example. I have a very negative opinion of Andy Duke, but I thought a lot of his attacks on Andy Duke were just, very unbecoming. I think it's almost unanimous in the poker world that the opinion towards Andy Duke is negative. But that doesn't mean you publicly call her 4-letter words and say some of the stuff he said about it. It's just not the way you handle things. He advocated taking a baseball bat to certain people. There's laws against vigilante justice, and he's now kind of claims that he said that it was okay with him if somebody else did that. Well, it doesn't matter that exactly how he worded it. That's what it meant. So, we think that there's a lot of issues there, but hopefully, from now on, he seems to be, much better. Even put a post up recently where he seemed to be complimenting myself and David Sklansky, which kind of surprised us.
Where do you post that at?
There was a thread on I think it was on News, Reviews, and Gossip about whether no limit is like long-term good for poker. There's a little poll in it, and he began his last post saying, "I agree with everything David and Mason said." I mean, I found that unbelievable, given some of the other things he said about me and the kind of emails I have from him. But if he's going to be, he wants to operate, in a first-class way, that's fine with us.
Yeah, you mentioned the thing about no limit hold'em earlier and how it's bad for the future of poker. I don't see no limit hold'em becoming the most popularized game in poker. I guess you don't either, correct?
Well, it's very well entrenched, that's for sure.
Right.
The problem is that bad players lose their money too fast. So it makes it hard for the game to grow. See, when the poker boom began, all this stuff was on TV and it was like a sensation. So we had a huge number of people come into poker. And since they were watching No Limit Hold'em, that's the game they wanted to play. What they didn't understand is they were actually watching No Limit Hold'em tournaments. No Limit Hold'em tournaments is very different from No Limit Hold'em cash games. There's a lot of reasons for that. One reason is antes. Another reason is people tend to have small stack sizes compared to the blinds in many spots in tournaments. So you get a lot of people moving all in, so that you don't get this very tight play and so on. And so the luck factors are much higher. But in no limit cash games, bad players just never have a. Get that a minute. Bad players just don't have enough winning nights to keep playing.
What is that?
That's my cell phone. It quacks like a duck.
Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. Rodney in the chat says this guy is holding on to a grudge and he's bringing up private stuff publicly right now, not DNEGs.
He's entitled to his opinion. Again, I hardly know Daniel Negreanu. I've had 30 seconds of conversations with him. I know if you go back, the last big problem we had with him was in 2012. A group came along called Las Vegas Poker Radio, and they contacted us. And they were doing something called like a 50-hour marathon poker cast for a charity. And on our website, we have a no solicitation policy. for money. No one can come on our site and solicit money. We have made a couple exceptions over the years, but that's generally our policy. But we're certainly not going to let some group we never heard of make that those type of solicitations. So I began to get attacked by them, and Negrano on his website attacked me, called me all sorts of 4-letter words and everything. And it was just, I mean, I actually had a conversation with my attorney about suing him for libel. And because my attorney wanted to go with it, but I said no. Anyway, it turned out a few months later, the thing had been a scam. The charity was legitimate. The guy who organized it apparently was able to keep a lot of the money himself. He had a gambling problem. And I actually donated $2,500 of my own money to the charity to help him along. We never got an apology from Negrano. We never even got an admission from him that we actually did things right. So if that guy thinks we have a grudge against him, I think he should go back and look again. And you can find all this stuff on Negrano's website, the Full Contact Poker.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, I feel like Daniel, obviously we see what's public. I think he does a really great job at being an ambassador to people. I mean, I think he's a lot of people's favorite poker player. I mean, he's most poker players' favorite poker player. So I feel like, I guess when I see him, I think he does a pretty good job. And
I agree with you. When he's right and he's positive, he's very, very good. He's very outgoing. He seems very approachable. I mean, if you're watching something on TV, he seems like a real good guy. But we've had a lot of issues with him over the years, and we never did anything to him. We don't even know where a lot of this stuff comes from.
Well, I'm sure he'll have something to say about that at some point in time. I'm sure he'll see this or he'll hear about it, and maybe we'll get an answer. So I'd like to know more about it.
Just as long as he knows that we are prepared to call him out every time he does something like this. I've had conversations, private conversations. Well, maybe I shouldn't say, but there's one poker manager I had a private conversation with who told me that when he sees Negrano, he walks the other way because he doesn't want to be the next one to be attacked.
Wow. Okay.
Anyway, let's go to a different subject. He's caused us a lot of problems over the years for no reason at all.
Yeah, let's go to something.
By the way, one last slide. He's posting on our website. He posts on and off on our website. I know he got very mad several years ago when he got banned for a day, but that's because he was coming on there violating the self-promotion rules. So one of our moderators banned him.
Oh, that's a good question, actually. We'll go to something else. Do you follow daily fantasy sports at all? Are you up to date on the daily fantasy sports craze, the daily fantasy sports world?
I think the answer to that's probably 98% no. I mean, I'm aware of daily fantasy sports, and we actually have some daily fantasy sports advertising on our site, and we have a daily fantasy sports forum, and that's basically all I know.
Yeah, Team Ivy said, Poppy, ask him how he's going to incorporate DFS into 2+2.
Well, we do have a daily fantasy sports forum. We've actually talked to a couple of people who we thought were real knowledgeable in the area to try to come in and maybe host a forum or something like that. But it just hasn't happened yet. We'd like to get that happening. In fact, if there's somebody listening who thinks he's an expert in that area or is real good in that area and would like to do something like that, just come on our website and send me a private message.
Cool. Well, so what would their role would be? They would be like the names. So you've been giving out names to different subforums. So they'd be like hosted by this person.
Right, and then we would do some things in return for them. If they wanted to run some advertising or promote some of their own stuff, then we would allow to do that in exchange. For instance, let's say you were real good at fantasy sports and you wanted to do that, we would let you promote, this podcast. Actually, we let you promote it anyway on the side, but that's what we would do.
Well, unfortunately, I just started playing DFS and I'm terrible at it. So, well, I'm not terrible, but I'm certainly not a winning DFS player, so that won't be me.
Well, I know nothing, so.
Let me go back in the YouTube chat. I haven't given any shout outs yet, guys. I'm enjoying, you're sort of you're a challenge to have on the podcast because you do a lot of pauses when you talk. And whenever someone pauses, I take that as they're done speaking. But when you pause, you usually keep talking. So I'm trying to like pick my spots. And a few times I don't usually interrupt people. I do a good job at that. But a few times I've interrupted you. You've got the pausing speaking down quite well.
Okay. Well, I think you've done a good job hosting this. From the interview point of view, I think you've done real good. I don't get interviewed very often, so.
I know. Well, that's why I remember when I asked you, I was like, "Hey, would you come on the podcast?" Because I never hear anything with you ever. So like, I've been.
Well, part of my the way 2+2 is run and set up, I always wanted to stay in the background. I kind of wanted to promote the whole idea of 2+2, and I wanted to promote some of our authors. So my job was to stay in the background and make sure that those things happen. So it's only recently I've been thinking that I could come out and do more of these type of interviews.
Cool. I mean, I think you're not the face of 2+2, but you are, 2+2. So I think if people got to hear more from you, they would obviously enjoy your story. Like the first part was about bombing Russia. You know what I mean? Like, for those who missed the first part of the podcast, you got to go check it out. But like stuff like that is super interesting. And I mean, just hearing that's going to make people, I feel like, be interested. If they don't know about 2+2, they'd become interested about 2+2.
Right. I was, it's almost humorous to think about it, but I was involved in figuring out, exactly how you're going to destroy the Soviet Union.
Did you? So
I don't know anything anymore. It's been so long, so everything's different today.
Did you have a direct impact on that though? Like, did you come up with something that may have led to something being done? I mean, something happening then?
Well, I worked with in reliability engineering. Now, reliability engineering obviously has a very big impact. And reliability engineering is really a blend of engineering and probability theory. So there was about 30 or 40 engineers and one statistician. That's all you needed. So I sort of had an impact on, even though I was young at the time, I had sort of an impact on a lot of things to do with reliability engineering, which is important, to the final product. But I didn't really have an impact in the sense that, I mean, I went to a meeting once, and there was a presentation being made to an Air Force general, and his title was Commander of the Air Force West of the Mississippi. So he was a pretty important guy. I mean, I didn't like sit down one-on-one with him or anything, but
yeah.
I was in the back of the room and I'd done work that had a little something to do with that meeting or presentation.
It's pretty wild. Were you nervous at the time? Were you scared? Were you a little intimidated? Like, how'd you feel about being in that sort of environment?
Actually, I was never nervous because I knew my stuff. I was competent in what it was I was doing. So I remember sometimes going to meetings, with members of management. I'd get in arguments with them about how things work, statistically or probabilistically, because again, and the same thing that happens in poker is certain aspects of probability theory are just very, very counterintuitive. So see what happens there. This is actually an interesting discussion, but most people live in the real world. In the real world, you deal with numbers that can become very big and numbers that become very small and even negative. Especially if you're a poker player, you can run your bankroll up to a lot of money. You can go broke and owe everybody money. So you can go from very negative numbers to very positive numbers. In the probabilistic world, you can only go from 0 to 1. And that changes a lot of things. A lot of things just don't work like they do in the real world. And because of that, it comes back to the psychology book, is that there's many, many things that happen and people do are easily explained if you understand the probability theory and the way it impacts things in poker. But if you're not able to think that way, it doesn't seem logical. So I have a long history of this because of my education and the jobs I had where I would deal with people, and they would present things, and I would say, well, most everything I heard was wrong. You know, here's why. Sometimes it didn't go over real well at first. It's always been that way.
Have you, so I asked about if you're ever intimidated, if you're intimidated in that specific situation, do you ever feel like you're ever around someone you meet now that you feel that sort of way? You're ever intimidated or a little bit nervous to talk with? Like maybe you meet some of these like Uber end boss of like different, like, you know, profitability or statistics. Like, do you ever feel that way whenever you talk with somebody?
No, today, not at all.
No.
No, that's just not a, that's just not an issue.
Do you feel like that just comes with, you know, getting older, gaining more self-confidence, gaining more knowledge to the point where, you know, you don't really feel like that anymore? Or do you think it's a different reason?
Well, I think the best example is the thing of an expert poker player. If you're an expert poker player and you have a long history of being successful, you're going to be very confident.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, very little is going to bother you. I mean, you know, I'm old now compared to most poker players, and that's really what's happened to me. But now, you know, I self-published a book in 1987, and the first article I ever wrote was 1983 that it was published. So I've been around this stuff for over 30 years. And everything has worked very well for me. So it doesn't really matter who I meet now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when you have 30 plus years of success at what you've been doing, you know, that sort of self-confidence really stays with you. I mean, it'll stay with you forever. That's
right. You know, I guess if I, you know, sat down with a bunch of experts from a field where I knew very little about, I might feel out of place. Mm-hmm. And I would stay very quiet. But for the things I do, I'm very comfortable with.
DZGR on YouTube says, I agree with Joey here on newbies viewing 2+2. I wish the forum can be more user-friendly. I know there is a wealth of knowledge hidden. I agree with that completely. I think that would be the one thing. There's so much great knowledge on 2+2, but I imagine it's just hard to really find that type of, it's really hard to find.
You can tell him we feel the same way. I mean, we're working on it, but I wish I knew the solution to that. You know, we do have one of the forums is called About the Forums. If he has suggestions, come on there and make suggestions. I don't usually post on there, but my representative will. If there's a good suggestion, I'll definitely hear about it.
If I order you guys a new chair to the office, will you put it in? Because you need a new chair. Your chair is not very GTO. It's one of the worst chairs I've seen in an office in my life.
I've never been one for, you know, fancy clothes or, you know, living real well. I live very modestly.
This isn't expensive. This is a relatively cheap chair. It's not the most. It's a $199 IKEA Marcus here, Mason. I'm telling you, you'll love it.
Actually, I have a much nicer chair. In my home, I have a little office that's where I do the manuscript work, and then my chair there is much nicer. It's one. I don't know. I've had it so long. I'm just comfortable in it. You can hear it squeaks.
I know. It's like
this chair's got to be
20 years old or something.
Yeah, this chair's at least 20 years old.
Yeah. Okay. Rumcake. What's up, Rumcake? On Twitch, she said running a forum can't be that large. Can't be simple. That's a good question. So my question actually is what are some of the biggest challenges you guys have? I know Matt Sclancy handles most of the day-to-day. I thought Matt was going to be on here, so shout out to Matt. But what are some of the biggest challenges you guys have at 2+2 right now?
Well, the biggest challenge would be making sure Matt Scalansky runs everything right. I don't really know the answer to that. I just things come up all the time. I know every couple of months we get a threatening letter from some attorney, and because somebody posts something they didn't like. And that's always been a challenge. And I guess the biggest challenge is where do you draw the line with in moderation with banning people? I mean, what do you allow, what do you not allow, and so on.
Well,
I think we've done that fairly well, but that's always been an issue.
well, I'm not a good person to talk to about banning people, because on my Twitch chat, they call me Kim Jong Joey, modeled after the dictator of North Korea. So that'll tell you about my.
Well, the original idea, which we still use today, is we wanted vigorous debate, but we also wanted the site to be a little bit fun. We wanted to keep insults to a minimum. On the internet, it's very hard to keep insults to a minimum. So these things, we're always trying to balance that. And fortunately for us, is we've got a lot of people to volunteer as moderators, and different forums do get moderated a little bit differently depending on sort of the character of the forum itself.
If you had to recommend like 2 or 3 sub forums out there for people who are interested in, maybe this is like the hidden gem, or a great forum to take in some knowledge, or to learn something, or to be entertained, or to join the community.
I'll tell you what I think the hidden gem is, and I actually look at it all the time. It doesn't have much traffic right now. That's our history forum. I like history, but we have a few people on there who are like brilliant. I mean, there was a discussion of, who are the greatest generals, and one guy put a list up of 100, from 1 to 100 of the who he thought were the 100 greatest generals, and he had a paragraph by each one explaining who they were and what they did. Don't get stuff like that. I know many years ago, I used WordPerfect as my word processor. I don't use Microsoft Word. And many years ago, I had a very, very strange problem with it. And I had no idea what to do, so I went to our computer forum, and I tried to explain what my problem was. I got like 5 or 6 people right off the bat just told me what I needed to do and what the answer was.
Mm-hmm.
And so there really are a lot of tremendous people on there, and there's a lot of great knowledge on there. And there's also, mainly because of how big it grew, there's a fair amount of noise at times. But you can't have one without the other.
AT's asked, is there a 2+2 app? Yes, there is a 2+2 app. There's an official 2+2 app, I believe, and there's also Tap Talk, which is another option. So you have 2 options for that.
Okay, I only know about Tap Talk. I didn't know there was another official app.
I'm pretty sure there's an official 2+2 app. I'm not going to say it's the best app, but there's a 2+2 app, I believe.
Well, there's 2 versions of it. That might be what you're thinking of. I use the old version. I don't really like the new version very much.
That list of
but yes, there's an app, but it's just for the forums. And we have a lot more stuff on the websites than just the forums. We have our internet magazine, and that's another gem that we think a lot of people don't read. About every month, we put up about a dozen articles. We pay for these articles, and some of them are very, very good. They're all sorts of different strategy things, and there's also articles about other going-ons in the poker world, especially the political stuff.
There's a magazine? I've never heard about this magazine ever.
Well, you need to start reading it then. It's the 2+2 Internet Magazine. If you go to a forum page and look in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little link for it.
I feel like I'm missing so much on the forums.
And of course, we have our podcast, which is very popular.
2+2 PokerCast. Shout out to Adam. Shout out to Ross. Shout out to T-Chan. Shout out to Mike Johnson. They've been grinding that. That was one of the first podcasts I ever listened to. That was one of the first podcasts I ever in general listened to. That was the one I used to walk to when I was playing 10 cent 25 cent. I'd walk to McDonald's and I would listen to 2+2 PokerCast, and I would go home in 24 table and be like, I'm gonna be on the PokerCast one day. And then when I finally got on there, it was like the fucking coolest day of my poker career up at that point.
Terrence Chan is now on there, and he's very good too. Yeah, it's an interesting story how he ended up getting hooked up with them. Adam Schwartz, I guess he didn't realize it. He was violating our self-promotion guidelines for their old Rounders show. And Stephen McLaughlin, who posts this TT, he was working for us at that time with doing marketing work. So he brought Adam by the office one day and we all went out to lunch. About halfway through lunch, well, we were part of the purpose of the lunch was to talk to Adam about what he was allowed to say and not allowed to say and so on. Finally, halfway through lunch, I said, why don't you just bring this thing into 2+2? You know, so that was agreed upon right then. It was maybe the best decision we ever made. All kind of happened accidentally.
That's pretty funny that it sort of happened accidentally, and now it's like it's like a mainstay of the 2+2 ecosystem. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like that's how a lot of people get their, like, because you can read 2+2, but I mean, if you listen to the PokerCast, you get all the news, you get all the updates. I mean, so like that's people's only really, I guess, avenue to know what's happening in poker really is listening to the PokerCast every week.
Well, we feel we have one of the top 2 poker casts, I guess. That way, I said it that way so you won't get mad. and we're just very, very fortunate. We got the guys we got. We're really terrific.
Yeah, I think. I mean, Adam. I don't know. Adam's been doing it this long. He's been doing it since he's been podcasting for like 10 years or something. I don't. It seems like yeah, I feel like I would lose the desire over time to do it 10 years. I mean, maybe not. I guess I don't know.
I need to go. Is this enough?
You gotta go. Yeah, it's enough, man. I mean, I could talk to you for a lot. I'm gonna get you back on here at some point in time soon.
Another day.
Yeah, okay, I'll get you back on. There's some more. There's honestly like 100 things more.
There's a couple more quick questions I can answer. I just have to be somewhere at 5 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Kev Math, I don't know what you're saying. Kevin, what are you talking about, Bobby? All right, we'll take a couple quick hitters here, guys. And yeah, if you guys have any, let me know. The people love you, man. The people on Twitch, they're enjoying you on, man. I appreciate you coming on here today.
And you know, we have a Twitch page too now. We have a Twitch forum and a Twitch page. Nice. You can come to our website and you can watch some of these poker players do their Twitch stuff.
Twitch. Gorgeous Gamer. What's up, Gorgeous Gamer? You need to be on the Twitch site. But yeah, for you guys, if you guys are interested in that, there's obviously you guys worked with Twitch or I guess I don't know if you actually work with Twitch, but you set up an official Twitch page on the sidebar. I believe it still updates where you have people on there. And it seems like you think Twitch is going to be a pretty, I know DS was streaming on there for a little bit. It seems like you think Twitch is going to be a very big part of poker potentially here.
Well, we met with Twitch representative. That's how it all got set up. We think Twitch has a lot of potential. Whether it reaches that potential relative to poker, we don't know. Mm-hmm. We'll just see what happens. Sometimes these things burn out. Other times they just grow and grow and grow. So only time will tell on that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know. It seems like it's only gaining in popularity. You have a lot of people that are really building up their profiles on Twitch that are streaming every single day. And I feel like it's only, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Twitch seems like they're smart about shit. So I feel like it's going to do well. Even if poker starts falling off, I think Twitch, because it's not necessarily poker, it's the streamers that are popular. So if these streamers are streaming every single day, they really start building up their profile in there. And it doesn't matter what they're doing at that point. People just come to watch. So I think I really think I don't know. I think the upside is kind of unlimited in terms of what it could do for how popular it could be.
We'll find out over time. I mean, when we began our website, we thought it was 50-50 we'd get a post. And look at, now I think we have about 50 million posts and all.
I know you probably do. I have 13,700, I believe. Thank you. Shout out to me for contributing to the site. No shout out to me.
Any other questions?
Nah, man, that's it. I think we'll wrap it up. Guys on YouTube, thanks a lot for all the comments. Thanks a lot for all the questions. If you want to check out 2+2, it's 2+2.com. Pretty simple. And yeah, guys on Twitch, thanks for all the comments. Thanks for all the questions. Had a lot of fun, Mason. We're going to get you back on soon.
Okay,
and
good.
Thank you for coming on.
Good talking to you.
You too. I'll see you later, Mason.
Bye.
All right. Peace.